All right, Bruchim Abayim, everybody. Welcome to Kehilat Derech HaYashar's teaching portion of our service this week. I'm glad you all have joined us, even though it is a holiday weekend. People are out enjoying the wonderful weather and the part of the year that we like to call summer. So if you've joined us today or possibly, seeing this video later, again, I appreciate the fact that you support us. You come to watch our teachings and support the ministry that God has entrusted us to bring forth the Word, to bring forth the things that He's showing us within His Scriptures. This week is Torah portion Korach, Parashat Korach, and I've titled this teaching this week, Moses Can't Get a Break. Okay, the last couple of Torah portions, it began with the Erev Rav, and they were complaining about receiving not having enough meat, the food that they're eating. Yeah, that doesn't go online, but thank you. The Torah portions have been basically a lot of complaining and a lot of uprising against the leadership of Moses because they left Egypt. They're out in the Midbar, out in the middle of the wilderness, and they're having a difficult time dealing with the loss of their security blanket, if you want to call it that, right? Messiah Yeshua came and set us free. He says, if the Son sets you free, you're free indeed. And when He sets us free, sometimes we're just kind of meandering about and blundering about in the wilderness. Sometimes we're just kind of wandering around and not always seeing things the way that they should be viewed. Not always seeing the supervision of God. Not always realizing the presence of God that is with us all the time. And so when that happens, there starts to be, in Yiddish we call it kvetching. We start complaining and moaning and groaning and bellyaching about our situation, about where we're at, what we don't have, what's going on in our lives, all of our trials and tribulations. Oh, woe is me. And this is how this entire thing started in Bamidbar, in the book of Numbers, as they started crying about they didn't have any meat. Oh, we remember how things used to be, right? Reminds me again of that movie, The Matrix. He goes back into the Matrix. He decides he doesn't want to be a part of the real world anymore. He knows, he's sitting there, he's eating steak, and he's talking to the agents. And he's eating the steak, and he's chewing on the steak, and he goes, you know what? He says, I know this isn't real, but I don't care. He says, it's enjoyable for me. I want to enjoy this, right? And so he basically just blocks it out of his mind of the real world that he's living in, and all of the troubles that are with it, which in a way is a good way. But nonetheless, he's not understanding that there's a reality underlying everything. And that's really the point of the entire movie, is that there's a reality underneath everything. And that reality for us is God. That reality is the fact that God is the creator. He's the sustainer of all things. And by the word of His power, all things are sustained in this world. And every situation that we find ourselves in is purely and directly by the supervision of God. Again, we talked about this a little bit this morning. He led them through the 40 years through the wilderness. He led them all the way through that great and terrible wilderness for 40 years. And He allowed them to hunger and allowed them to thirst for one reason and one reason only. So that the people could see what was in their hearts. So that they could understand that there are some hidden deficiencies within us. We're not always looking at the hashkikah. We're not always looking at the fact that God has allowed into our lives what He's allowed into our lives. And Korach is no exception. We're going to look into that a little bit today and understand where Korach is coming from. And this entire situation concerning him, Dathan, Aviram, and all of the 250 men that came with him to start this uprising against Moses. And so we're going to look at three things today. Number one, we're going to look at the motive. What is the motive behind Korach coming to start this rebellion? We're going to look at the moment, the time period. What's significant about the time period? And then we're going to look at the method. We're going to look at how he approached this situation and how it differs from other situations that we look at that were somewhat similar, and yet there wasn't called a rebellion or an uprising. So we're going to look at those three aspects this morning concerning Korach's rebellion. First thing we're going to do is, as we always do, is we're going to do our blessing before the Torah study. Unfortunately, you don't have it in the slides, so we're just going to have to do this by memory. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us by your commandments and commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. Amen. And we're going to read Numbers chapter 16, verses 1 through 3. It says, Now Korach, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, with Datan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men, and they rose up before Moses with some of the children of Israel. 250 leaders of the congregation, representatives of the congregation, men of renown. They gathered together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, You take too much upon yourselves, for all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? Okay, so basically we just see the Korach raises up a bunch of people, marches into the camp and says, Hey, Moses, Aaron, why do you guys think you're special? Why do you guys think that you're better than everybody else? Why did you appoint yourself to be the leader and then point your brother here to be the high priest? I mean, that kind of looks a lot like what's known as nepotism, right? It's favor based on familial ties. And so the sages say that this is the quintessential rebellion. In Pirkei Avot 5:17, this is what it says. Every dispute that is for the sake of heaven will in the end endure. But one that is not for the sake of heaven will not endure. Which is the controversy that is for the sake of heaven? Such was the controversy of Hillel and Shammai. And which is the controversy that is not for the sake of heaven? Such was the controversy of Korach and all his congregants. Okay, so it's very interesting that there are arguments and disputes that actually have a valid purpose, and it's for the furthering of the kingdom. But Korach's rebellion had no furtherance for the kingdom. And so the sages understood this. Korach came with the wrong attitude. They understood that there was something underlying all of this and what was going on. And so it says that the controversy for the sake of heaven, we read in the Derech HaYashar reading today from Acts chapter 5. And the sage Gamliel, who basically told his compatriots, they sent the apostles outside, he told the rest of them, said, look, if this thing that's going on is for the sake of heaven, he said, you're not going to be able to stop it. He cites two other people who decided that they wanted to proclaim themselves to be the Messiah. And he said, after these guys died, he said their little factions, they just disappeared. And so if this thing concerning Yeshua is in fact of man, you don't have to worry about it. He's dead. This will go away in a little while. You don't have to worry about it. But he says, if this is in fact of God, there's nothing you can do about it. Right? So Gamliel understood this whole sake of heaven versus not for the sake of heaven thing. And this is what he posited in Acts chapter 5. Now, and the first word in our Torah portion here is the word vayikach. Vayikach Korah. It's vayikach, and he took. And why is it in the singular? Vayikach, and Korah took. Because the rest of the verse tells us that all of the sons of Dathan, Aviram, and On, the son of Peleth and the son of Reuben, they were all together with him. And so it starts out, Vayikach, Korah took. However, in our New King James Version translation, it doesn't say that. The word Vayikach is not translated all the way down to where it says, took men, just before verse 2. So why did they put that all the way down at the end of the verse when verse 1 actually starts out with, and he took? And it's in the singular. It doesn't say that they took, because he was with Aviram and with and Datan and On, the son of Peleth. So why is it in the singular? When we connect this back to the previous Torah portion, the very last words of the Torah portion last week says, I am the Lord your God. And then the very next word, Vayikach, and he took in the singular. So we can look at this and say, why does it say that, and the Lord took Korach? See, we can think about this in the same lines of Pharaoh from Egypt. God allowed Pharaoh to bow up against Moses. He allowed the situation so that Moses would go and free his people. God also allowed this situation with Korach. Korach, in his own heart, wanted to bow up against Moses. He wanted to go against Moses. So God allowed him, took him, and sent him to the front to bring about this rebellion against Moses. And there's a reason for this, right? Number one, we see a lesson from this. There's two levels of understanding. Number one, God allowed this to happen to show the humility of Moses. The humility of Moses. And it also came to show us his response, to give us an example on how we're supposed to respond to this. But they banded together, Vayikach, Korach. It's in the singular to show that him, Datan, Aviram, and On were all on the same level. They all banded together in order to bring a rebellion against Moses. But then eventually it says that they stood in the plural. They stood in the plural, and that indicates that they, at the end, their rebellion dissipated because they were in opposition to Moses only over one issue. They were only in opposition to Moses over one issue, and that is they didn't like the nepotism. Other than that, they were not together. They were not unified together as a whole in their purpose, because each person who joined the rebellion, they had a problem in their own heart, and they wanted to be the ones who wanted to be the boss. They wanted to be the ones. If we take this into another realm, maybe another analogy, there's a bunch of people who don't like the government. And so they band together, Black Lives Matter, whatever for other fringe groups. They all band together to overthrow the police, right? But then each one of them has their very own agenda. And at the end of the day, whenever they're done with their protests, guess what? They're not banded together anymore. They're not unified. They're only unified by one thing. And in the end, it usually dissipates. In the end, it's usually over with. And so this is something that we can see from the text. Vayikach is singular when they started out, but literally in their hearts, they were not unified. They were only unified against their anger against Moses. Okay, and then we talked about the fact that Korach was led by God in order to start this rebellion, to show us some things. Now, that does not mean that God violated Korach's free will. He didn't violate his free will. He only encouraged him and strengthened him in the will that he already had. He wanted to do this rebellion. He had an issue and a problem with Moses. And so this was an opportunity to bring this to the surface so that he could see it and understand it. Now, was the claim that Korach had, was it a legitimate claim? Was it a legitimate claim? Did Moses, in fact, elevate himself and elevate his brother? Well, in his mind, he thinks that he did, okay? The first thing we see is that Korach wanted an egalitarian society, okay? An egalitarian society. At least that's what it appears, okay? Egalitarian means the doctrine that all people are equal and deserve equal rights and opportunities, okay? On the surface, we read this, and we say, that's not such a bad thing. It's not such a bad thing. But what he actually wanted was no social hierarchy. That is the logical outworking of this egalitarian society. He didn't want, or what he wanted was everybody to be on the same level. He didn't want everybody to have different positions and no social hierarchy, which is what took place in Israel. This took place. And the question is can a society be sustained if there's no authoritative level within a society? I mean, it's a great idea. It's a great idea to think that everybody's holy, right? This is what he said. Moses, we're all holy. All of us in the congregation, when we were out there in the wilderness, we all heard the words of God. We all understood everything that was going on. But now when we come into the land, or we're getting ready to go into the land, and you want to elevate yourself above everybody else, because when we go into the land, guess what's going to happen? The Levites are going to stay the holy people. Aaron's going to be the holy people. And then those who are the rest of the people are going to go into the land. They're going to have to work for it. If you remember last week, we talked about that's the reason the spies had the problem. They were going to leave the womb of the desert, where God provided all of their food, provided all of their shelter, provided all of the necessities out in life, and they were just a holy people walking through the wilderness. And then they were going to have to go into the land, and then they were going to have to put down their holiness from morning until evening, and they were going to have to work the land. They were going to get jobs. They were going to have to do things that they needed to do. And Korach started having an issue with this. He said, wait a minute, why isn't we getting into the land? Some of us are going to have to go to work, but you, Moses and Aaron, you guys get to sit in the tabernacle all day in the air conditioning. All you guys do is just pray and you worship all day while the rest of us got to go to work. He said, it's not fair. It's not fair whatsoever that you guys get to remain at this level and the rest of us have to go to work. So we have to ask the question. Yitro, when he came to Moses, Yitro kind of approached the exact same issue with Moses. He said, Moses, why do you sit here day after day from morning till the sun comes up till the sun goes down, and you judge the peoples all by yourself? He said, you should have people to help you, right? People over thousands, peoples over hundreds, peoples over tens. You should have a hierarchy in this situation so that you don't wear yourself out. Let me ask you a question. Moses grew up in the palace of Egypt. He grew up in Pharaoh's palace. He was around the government. He was in the courts, the court system. You know, him running around in his diapers in Pharaoh's palace, in the court, and all this stuff. He grew up in the system where there was a hierarchy. It's not like he didn't know. It's not like he didn't understand that there had to be some sort of authoritative hierarchy within the nation of Israel. But he's out in the desert and he's not instituting it. Why? Was Moses an egalitarian? Was Moses one who said we shouldn't have any structure? It took Yitro to come and tell him, what you're doing is not good. You're going to wear yourself out, and you're going to wear these people out too, because they're going to be standing in line all day. So did Moses really not want any hierarchy? And I would say on a certain level, he didn't. And here's the reason. Once a person gets so high up in the hierarchy, he no longer has a connection with the people. Mm-hmm. They become so big for their own britches that they can't spend 10, 15, 20 minutes talking to people on a regular, normal level. He just doesn't have the time. Or he thinks he's big-headed and he knows everything and he can't relate to the Amharites, the regular common people of the land. And Moses understood this. He understood, once I attain a certain position, now I'm becoming separated from the people. And Moses didn't want to do that. He wanted to be with the people. He wanted to have a relationship with the people. So I think Moses understood on a certain level that there had to be this separation, but even though he didn't want it. Now, Yitro comes, tells him what you're doing is not good. Korach comes up and tells him the exact same thing that Yitro did. He said, well, look at you. You're doing something wrong here, Moses. You're not being like the rest of the people. You're not going to go into the land and start working your crops. He said, you're not going to go in there and doing this. So what we see on two different levels is that Moses just can't seem to get a break in whatever he's doing. If he's with the people, they complain against him. If he's elevated, they complain against him. And this is kind of a problem. It's kind of a problem. So we see Yitro comes and he tells him, and let me tell you the whole thing, we'll get to that, about why it is that it was different between Yitro and Korach. But I want to ask this question. Did Korach want to be the high priest? did he really want to be the high priest? Did he want to come in and say, I want that job? Or did he really want an egalitarian society? Did he really want one where everybody's on the same level? Well, why else would he lead such an uprising if he didn't want to be the priest? He brought 250 men with him. This tells me something. There was conversations going on in the congregation long before Korach ever rose up with his minion, with his rebellion with him. That means that there was some murmuring going around, and he was in the modern day street vernacular, he was talking junk about Moses, right? Based on his own deficient understanding, based on his own deficient problem. We're going to talk about what Korach's problem was. The sages put their finger on it. They said, we know exactly what his issue was. But he wanted to create an uprising, and he needed the support from the people. A person uprising on their own doesn't really accomplish much. But if you can turn the hearts of everybody else in the congregation, if you can get them to see your point of view, have them get on board with your grievance, oh, well, then now you've got a mutiny going on. Now you've got support. See, Moses, I'm not the only one who thinks this. There's a bunch of other people who agree with me against what you're doing. Okay? He needed the support from the people. And these weren't just anybody. He didn't go and get the janitor and the lawnmower. He didn't go get those people. He went and he convinced the men of renown. They were leaders of the tribes. And these were the people he brought with him. And here's the thing. If Korach wins, if he truly wanted an egalitarian society, Korach wouldn't have wanted the priesthood for himself. He wouldn't want to become a high priest, and he would have his egalitarian society. But if Korach wins and he becomes high priest, he hasn't created the society that he's telling everybody he wants to create. He now becomes the boss man. There's still a hierarchy. There was no way that he was not going to take over the leadership. There was no way that he wasn't going to do it. It says that there was On, the son of Pelet, that come with him. However, later on, he's still alive. He didn't get swallowed up by the land that swallowed up all the rest of Korach and all of his followers. Why? The sages say that On's wife came to him with a very strong argument. He basically said this. Oh, let me explain what Korach said first. Korach, Rashi says, and what induced Korach to quarrel with Moses? He was envious of the princely dignity held by Eliphaz, the son of Uzziel. Whom Moses had appointed prince over the sons of Kohath, although this was by the express command of God. So Rashi points out the fact that Korach had some envy inside of him. So On's wife looks at the situation. She tells On before he goes, she said, why are you siding with Korach? He said, under Moses, he said, you're a subject. But if you go here and you follow this rebellion, he said, then you'll be subject to Korach. He said, there won't be any benefit for you. Even though he's telling you that he wants this society where everybody's on the same level, his wife brought a very strong argument. And you know what? The sages say that she took him, gave him wine to drink, made him fall asleep, and then stood by the doorway when Dathan, Abiram, and Korach walked by, and she told him, he's not here. Keep moving. Right? She saved her and her family from being swallowed up by the earth by showing On that what was going on was not really what's going on. Right? We have to have that kind of discernment. Politicians will tell you all day long what they're going to do. Oh, I'm going to fix the corruption. I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to do that for you. But the chances are they're not going to do it. All they're doing is telling us what they think we want to hear so that we'll put the ballot in the box for them so they can get elected. This is all Korach did. He was a politician of the first degree. He convinced everybody that, hey, you know what? Hey, nice to meet you. Good. Yeah, I'm one of you. I'm a person just like you are. And don't you think we all deserve equal rights? We all should have everything. We need to have an egalitarian society where you're just as equal as I am and everything's good and we're all good, right? This is what Korach did. He was a first-rate politician to gather up support for him. The problem is his agenda was different than what he was telling everybody. The sages caught on to this. They said he had envy in his heart. And they got this from the scriptures. We look at Midrash Tanchuma, Korach 1. It says, now Korach betook himself. Because of what did he dissent? Because of Elizaphan, the son of his father's brother, who had been appointed prince or nasi over his clan. So it says in Numbers 3:30, and the prince of the ancestral house of the Kohathite clan was Elizaphan ben Uzziel. Korach said, father had 4 brothers. It is so stated according to Exodus 6:18. And the sons of Kohath were Amram, Issar, Hebron, and Uzziel. As for Amram, the firstborn, his son Aaron and his sons attained the high priesthood, and his brother Moses attained the kingship. So who deserves to get second place? Should it not be the second son? And so what we see in here is that the second son, who is Issar, should have been the next in line, his sons, to take over whatever position that was in line for. But they didn't. They skipped Issar, Hebron, and went straight to Uzziel. Uzziel is a son. Korach is a son of Uzziel. He's angry because he got slighted. Now, I am Itzar's son. I'm sorry, Korach was Itzar's son. And he skipped over Issar to Uzziel to give him the next place within line. He says, now I am Itzar's son. I deserved to be prince of my clan. But he has appointed the son of Uzziel. Should the youngest of father's brothers become superior to me? See, I am dissenting and declaring everything invalid, whatever he had done. Okay, so this was his problem. Moses skipped over him and appointed somebody from a younger part to be the head of a clan versus Korach. You know what he said? I deserve that. That's mine. It belongs to me. And so he felt slighted. He felt like he didn't get his proper recognition. He didn't get the proper honor that he should have received. Interesting. It reminds me of a story I read about a guy called, he's called the Holy and Compassionate Shlita. He was holy and compassionate to everybody around him. A great guy, did all kinds of tzedakah. He gave charity and took care of people, and he was nice, and he taught Torah all the time. But to his wife, he was an ogre. He was an ogre to his own wife, wouldn't give her any money. He spent all the time outside of the house. He didn't want to deal with her kvetching or whatever it is he didn't want to deal with. And then he dies. And it's a great, great big to-do in Jerusalem, right? Everybody loved this guy. So young men, yeshiva students were wailing on the streets. There's a big procession. All the town's rabbis and people from other cities come, and they make a big to-do out of his funeral. He's, from the heavenlies, he's watching going, wow, he's gotten such an honor. Well, he goes up into the heavens, and as soon as he walks through the gates, 4 black-clad angels in military gear grab a hold of him, and they drag him into a court. And he's standing before all of these judges, the elders within the heaven, and they all have got this scornful look on his face. And the chief justice looks at him and said, look, he said, you have failed in your mission. He said, I've given you one job, and that is to make your wife happy. And he said, you failed. And he's like, but look, all these people are mourning my death, and I did all these wonderful things. And he said, I don't care. He said, I gave you one job, and that is to take care of your wife, to make her happy, and to do what you needed to do in your own home. He said, you couldn't even do it in your own home. So he was expecting to get into heaven and get all this fanfare. He thought he was supposed to be honored because of all the great deeds that he did. But he lacked one thing. He lacked his own soul correction. The one place that out in society, nobody challenged the man. Nobody challenged him. They thought he was a great tzaddik, great scholar, all of these things that he did, generous, all these things. The only place he ever got challenged was in his own home. His wife challenged him on a regular basis. You know why? I had a lady, a wonderful lady. Her husband passed several years ago. We went to the funeral, and she said this. She said, "You want to understand who a man really is? So talk to her husband. Talk to his wife. You really want to understand a man? Talk to his wife. She'll tell you what he is, because a man does what he does in his home. He goes outside them doors, he's a completely different person. He puts on a whole different facade, right? So this guy gets to heaven. He's thinking he should, he was thinking the heavenly angels were going to be parading with their harps, right? Throwing confetti. Oh, look at the great Sadiq who just walked in." And he didn't understand. Korach's the same way. Korach thought that he deserved something. He was somebody. And that the fact that he got looked over, he got slighted by it. He felt like they had somehow or another skipped his honor, what he ought to have. But do you see, isn't God's ways from the beginning to choose whom he has decided? Right? Who was the firstborn of Abraham? Was it Ishmael or Yitzhak? It was Ishmael. But God skipped over Ishmael and chose Yitzhak. Who was the firstborn son of Jacob? Yitzhak. Yaakov. I'm sorry, Esau. Esau was the firstborn, but yet God didn't choose Esau. He chose Yaakov. He chose Jacob. Shaul was Israel's first king. It was Israel's first choice, but who was God's choice? It was David, right? So there's a lesson in this. Man's first choice is not always God's first choice. If I'm not chosen for something, if God hasn't elevated to me to a certain level, it's because God didn't want me in that level. I should rejoice in the level that I'm at. I should be faithful in the level that I'm at, whether I'm a servant of cleaning toilets, or whether I'm a servant of serving food, or whatever ministry God has allowed me to be. I should be okay with where I'm at. If God wants to elevate me, he's going to elevate me. And if God doesn't want me elevated, then I'm okay with that too. I have no ambition to be somebody great. All I know is I want to serve God right where I'm at. And these are the lessons that we're learning from this, is that whenever somebody has envy, jealousy in their heart, it spreads like wildfire. These are one of the super cardinal sins, is jealousy, because it's very, very seldom, put to rest. It's seldom that fire is ever put out. So why then was the priest elevated above common man, when the purpose of man is to elevate the mundane aspects of creation? What is the whole purpose of our existence here, right? They're in the wilderness, and God tells them, you got to go into the land. And when you go into the land, you have to work the land. You have to do things. You have to do mitzvah. That's the whole purpose of the Torah, is that there are things that we have to do. So why then is the priest then elevated above everybody else, in which they don't have land to work, and they don't have to do certain aspects of mundane living? Korach didn't see this was fair. We're all holy. Why then do we all have to go in and work the land, and you don't? Was Korach fair in his assessment that the priests thought that they were better than all the rest of the people? Was he actually fair or correct in his assessment? Is that what Moses and Aaron thought? Did they think that they were better than everybody else? That they were better than the rest of the people, so that they didn't have to do what everybody else did? You see, the layman, regular people every day, we spend a little bit of time in prayer and a little bit of time in study, and the rest of the bulk of our time is earning a living. It's going and getting a job, going and working, or whether you work your farm, you work your garden, whatever. And the priest spends most of his time in matters of holiness and little time on mundane matters of the day. And you would think, well, I would like to be the one that spends all this time in prayer. I want to spend all this time in study and all this other stuff. So why then do some people go here and other people stay here. Did the priests have it on easy street? Right? Because that's what most people think. Oh, you pastors, you got it so easy. All you do is just sit around and talk on the phone all day, and you just pray. Oh, and, we're praise and worship all day long. But in reality, it's a pretty hard job. And my wife says this on a regular basis, and she's absolutely right. Ministry is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job. If you don't actually take time to limit it, it will take up every single day and every minute of every day. And that's not just, just us, but, being a part of the community and reaching out to people and taking care of people's needs and all that other stuff. And so Korach's issue was going into the land actually has something to do with the Torah and doing the commandments. The doing of the deeds is more important than the job of the priests, because that's our job. Mankind was brought into the world, given the Torah for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to build a tabernacle for God to dwell in. It's not to just sit in the temple all day long and hey, hallelujah. It wasn't that. It was the fixing or the rectification of the earth. It was the rectification of the deficiencies within the world. So if the purpose of creation is to elevate the mundane to the level of holy, then why should there be a separation then? Why aren't the priests coming down to this level? If that's the case, Moses, we're all holy and we all should just do what you're doing. Why must the layman look up to and receive spiritual nourishment from the priest? Why does this need to happen? Well, because the people need the encouragement. The people need the help. The people need that word from the Lord. They need the encouragement, the prayer, the something to look at that is, for a lack of better terminology, more spiritual than the mundane, everyday thing. This is why we come to Shabbat services. This is why I spend my entire week preparing this right here, is to encourage each and every one of you. To encourage you in the, I know it's hard. I know. I worked a secular job for let's see, I'm 53. I started working when I was 15. So I spent many years. I can't even do the math right now. A lot of years working a secular job, and I understand the mundane aspects of life. I understand it. I get it. It's hard. It's training. And when you're doing things, you don't always see the spirituality of God. But this is why we hold classes on Wednesday night. This is why we do a Shabbat service, so that we can all be encouraged. But me, more specifically, I want to hear from the Lord and give you guys encouragement in the work that you're doing, and encouragement in the mundane things of life that you have to do, so that we can get a balanced picture. Yes, we're supposed to have the holy side. We have the holy spiritual side, but we also have the main mundane side. And here's the key. It's balance. It's balance. It's easy to just get up, go to work every day and not study and not pray. It's easy to do that. I know. I've done it. I get up, focused on the job that I need to do. And then there's little time for study and little time for prayer. And then on the other hand, you can become so holy that you don't do anything. And you have to maintain a balance to say, you know what? I need to involve myself in the world. So there's this draw to both sides of our existence. We are physical people, but we are also spiritual people, tied together in one body. One pulls one way, the other pulls the other way. And so we've got to find a balance in there. So did Korach want to come and just set things straight? Did he really want to fix what was going on? Well, in the Torah, it says that they combined against Moses and Aaron. The lesson is that they combined together for a common purpose, but it wasn't to actually fix something. It was so that each one then would have an opportunity to air his own grievances and try to grab the priesthood for themselves. They wanted to get out of, we got to go into the land and work. And that's what it is. Eventually, there was going to be division among them should they become successful in overthrowing Moses and Aaron. It would have just created all kinds of issue. So the next thing that we're going to look at is we're going to look at the moment. We're going to look at the timing. What was significant about the timing? Korach felt he had the backing of the community because of the complaints of the entire congregation previous to this situation. Korach saw what was going on, and he saw the division. And, there's a governmental phrase that goes something like this: never let a good calamity go to waste. Right? Korach sees what's going on, and he said, this is my time. There's already division. He says, I already see people grumbling. Now's my opportunity to start grabbing people. Now's my opportunity to power grab in this. Last week's Torah portion again was the 10 spies, and prior to that it was the heir of Rav. And right now he said, I'm going to deal right now with Moses with my grievance. And one grumble then sparks off grumbles in other people. Well, yeah, you're right. Well, now I have a problem. So now they start telling each other their problems and all the issues that they got going on. And now everybody's got problems. It spreads through the congregation like wildfire. Mm-hmm. So what's significant about Korach's timing was that the people were already divided. And what did Yeshua say about a house united versus a house divided? So a house divided will fall. And Korach understood this. He knew this. So what was the method? What was his method in going in this? In what manner did Korach approach Moses and Aaron? Well, number one, he approached him in bravado, in grandiose manner. He showed up with 250 people. He showed up with all kinds of people at his side. He didn't go to Moses by himself. And that's one of the differences when we see between him and Yitro. Yitro came to him by himself and said, I want to help you because I know this is going to wear you out. Korach didn't come to him in private. He didn't come to him in private. He came to him with leaders of renown, and it was a public challenge to Moses' authority. He didn't do it privately. He did it right in front of everybody and put Moses on the spot. And this was the difference between Yitro and Korach. But another thing is that Korach came in betrayal. He betrayed his heart because his heart beamed with pride and arrogance that he was right. I should have been in line for the next one. And you didn't give it to me, Moses. And so he wanted to prove in front of everybody that he was right, that Moses was wrong, and that Moses was choosing his own family members over other people. And so what was Moses' response? Right? He approached him in bravado. He approached him in betrayal. What was Moses' response? Moses' response was introspection. It says that Moses fell on his face when he heard this. Moses didn't start arguing. He didn't start a machloket and start arguing with him on the spot. Moses fell on his face. He fell on his face. What is our natural response? Our natural response is anger. We get angry. It goes right straight to the top of our hairline. What happens? We get defensive. We end up with defensiveness. We justify who we are and where we're at. We return a criticism. We retaliate against the person. Oh yeah, well, your hair looks stupid, right? These are natural responses, but that's not what Moses did. The Torah tells us that Moses was the most humble man of all men in the earth. Moses fell to his face and he started asking questions. He said, was there any validity? Right? Moses' response was humility. He says, have I become puffed up? Is what Korach's saying about me actually true? Am I really guilty? Am I guilty of what Korach is actually telling me? So before he responds, he takes a minute to do some introspection, to evaluate himself, to judge himself and say, am I really being the person that Korach says that I am? Another question is Korach an agent of Hashem? It's a good question. we spoke about earlier, Vayikach, and tied that to the end of chapter 15, where it says, I am the Lord your God. Did God use Korach as a means of buffeting Moses so that the people could see the humility and see the introspection of Moses? To give us an example on how to deal when people come at us like what I like to call sideways. They like to come at us sideways. What is our response? Do we have a natural response? Or do we stop for just a minute and go, let me look at the situation, and then respond in humility? Look at the situation from an objective point of view. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, the end goal is this. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says this: in Korach's view, the man on the street who spends the majority of his day in the mundane activities of life is just as holy as the priest whose entire day is spent in the holy temple. There's a certain amount of truth to the fact that each person's role is equally important. It is equally important. Each person is incredibly important in the community. Whether you're the person getting up here teaching, whether you were the cantor, whether you're the person who does the prayer, whether you're the person who helps in the kitchen, whatever the role is, it's equally important. So on that level, what Korach said is true. We're all equally level. No one person is more important on the level of essence. Essentially, we're all exactly the same. Each person has what God has given them to do exactly what they have to do in the body. Paul talks about this, said, is the eye, jealous of the foot? Does the foot have to be jealous because it's not the eye? No, it's not the case. Is the hand jealous of, the ear? No. I mean, I'm just paraphrasing. I know Paul didn't say it that way. But there's a certain amount of truth that everybody is equally important and equally worthy within the congregation. They're just as holy as the priest. The only thing is, the difference is they don't spend their entire day in the temple. Their holy temple is out in the world. Wherever you go, do you go to the store? Are you inquisitive to the person who's checking you out of the grocery line, and you ask them, how's your day? You give them a blessing. Oh, well, may God bless your day today. May you have it easy. May you go home early. Whatever it is that you can do to help encourage other people. That is everybody else's holy temple grounds in order to do those kind of things. The issue that the spies had was that they would have to give up a portion of their spiritual aspect of life for mundane activities, and the priests did not. That was their issue. I'm going to have to give up the sitting on the clouds playing the harp all day long while people feed me grapes and fan me with a big palm branch. So I'm going to have to give all that up. And he said, it's not fair that you guys don't have to give it up. If the purpose of man's involvement in creation is to uplift the mundane, why then, again, do we have to look at the priests? Who is doing the real work of God? Why work the land and set a portion apart for the priests? Why do we have to do that? Who's to say that the priest's role is any holier than the person who works it all day long? Who is to say this? Again, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, from the spies, we learn that God's goal for creation can only be realized when we enter the land, when our observance is more than an intellectual or emotional affair and finds expression in action. And from Korach, we learn that the emphasis on deed should not translate into a dry and mechanical observance. Physical performance of the commandments energized by awareness of the love of God and shines with the light of the morning. So again, the Lubavitcher Rebbe tells us, he said, it's a matter of balance. Some do this, some do that. The one who's doing this needs to balance their life out a little bit more with this. The one who does this needs to balance their life out a little bit more with that. So we can extrapolate from this episode the understanding that Korach's concern on a certain level was this. It was the letter versus the law. The letter versus the letter versus the spirit. We read in Romans 2:28 and 29. For he is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, not in the letter. whose praise is not from men, but from God. And what's he telling us? He's telling us that one who is a true follower of God is one who is from the inside. It's not the one who does the outside. The true one comes from the inside to the outside. Anybody can do mitzvot, and they can do what's known as the letter of the law. The law says that you should tithe mint, dill, and cumin. Okay, so I'll tithe mint, dill, and cumin. But Yeshua said you miss the weightier matters of the Torah: righteousness, justice, and mercy. These are things that come from the inside. Now, he didn't say, and to finish that thought, he said, you should have done the latter without neglecting the former. I mean, you should have done the former without neglecting the latter. He said, you should tithe the mint, dill, and cumin. That's the correct thing to do. He said, but you should also have added love, compassion, mercy, whatever he said, faith, justice, righteousness. He said, you should have done the latter without, you should have done the former without neglecting the latter. You have to incorporate both. It can't just be one or the other. Again, in Romans chapter 7, verse 6, Paul says this, but now we have been delivered from the law, having died to what we were held by, so that we should serve in the newness of the Spirit and not in the oldness of the letter. Now, I'm not going to tackle this here. Okay, I'm going to do this on my Tuesday night teaching. I'm going to talk about what Paul just said. We've been delivered from the law. Okay, it's not what it sounds like. He's not saying that we've been set free from the confines of that goofy old law that God gave us just to show us we're a sinner. Now that we got Mashiach, we're all good. We can do whatever we want to. That's not what he's not saying. He's not saying that we've been delivered from the law in the sense that it's no longer applicable. So that's a plug for my Tuesday night. It's called Now You Know. I'm going through things just like this. It sounds like Paul's saying the laws have been done away with. Well, I say hogwash. I don't know if that's a kosher word or not. That's not what Paul meant. He didn't say the Torah is no longer good anymore. He didn't say that. Okay. 2 Corinthians 3, 5 and 6. Not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think of anything as being from ourselves, but our sufficiency is from God, who also made us sufficient as ministers of the new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. You see, Paul's not making a dichotomy between the letter and the Spirit. He didn't say, stop doing the Torah because that kills, and that's just the letter of the law, and now all you have to do is be led by the Holy Spirit. That's not what this means. He says, don't approach the Torah from a pure, dry, unspiritual perspective. The letter does kill. If you don't have Spirit behind what you're doing, the Torah will do nothing but bring death and condemnation to you. That's it. He says, you should do the letter of the law, but with the Spirit. Add the Spirit. Don't take the law away. Add the Spirit to the law that you're doing. The end goal. You see, this was the whole situation in the Second Temple period. They were doing everything by the letter of the law, and the spirit of the law had completely missed it. And this is the whole issue behind Korach's rebellion. He really understood that, hey, we're all holy. We should all be just like you, Moses. You guys decided to pick the better part. Why don't you come down here with us? Better yet, why don't you make me high priest, and then I'll ascend to your level. What we learned from Korach's rebellion is that we're all on the same level, but there are certain aspects, one for the other, and they should bring balance. It should be balance. These all stem from Korach with a heart filled with envy, jealousy, pride, arrogance, and a host of other issues that plague mankind. This whole thing has been incorrectly understood. It's not the Spirit over the letter, but it's the Spirit and the letter. It's the Spirit and the letter. And once we get rid of that dichotomy, we then can do the will of God. We can do what he wants us to do. And we need to have proper balance in our lives over the spiritual versus the mundane. And how we do that is we take the mundane and we elevate it to the level of spirituality. If I'm cleaning toilets, praise God, I'm cleaning toilets. Thank you, Lord, that you've given me this opportunity to do what I'm doing. This may not be the situation that I wanted. I never in a million years would have thought I ended up in Washington State starting a congregation. It never crossed my radar. But today, I can honestly get up every morning and thank God for what he's done in my life, what he's given me, what he has blessed us with. Who'd ever thunk that last year, no job, no income, no way to go anywhere and do anything, that God would bring us to this point. And so every day I have to rely on the fact that God is in fact faithful. He's just, he's good, he's amazing, and whatever situation that God has placed me in is because that's the situation God wanted me in. Mm-hmm. And therefore we can have joy and be happy. And the key word is balance. It's all about balance. Finding out where we're at and just blessing God for the midst of that. So, thank you so much. Let us do our Birkat Hamazon. Not Hamazon. Our Birkat Kohanim, our priestly blessing, as we finish up the teaching portion of our service and get ready to do that wonderful thing called Oneg. If the sound today has not been good, I apologize. Having some technical issues for some reason. Things are not connecting the way that they should, so we're going to try to get that under control. That's kind of hard to listen when the sound is not all that great. But I thank you for sticking it out. Yevorechecha Adonai ve'yishmerecha Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chonecha Yis Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord guard you and protect you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. B'Shem Sar Shalom, Yeshua Mashiachenu, in the name of our Prince of Peace, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Go and be blessed.
And